Hello, it's me, Jen Ives, and this is my podcast, Lobotomy World. Thanks so much for joining me today. Slight change. I don't know if you've noticed, I've got two cameras. Which is a bit different, isn't it? That's a bit different. I feel like once you get to 12 podcasts, you have to sort of up the ante a little bit. And, well, I have this other camera, so I thought let's give it a gosh darn go. Also, in London at the moment, it is extremely hot. So sometimes when it gets this hot, cameras can fail. Did you know that? I don't know why, but it's something in a camera. I think cameras are made of ice. There's sort of an ice element in the microchips, which means that if it gets too hot, it can melt and then none of it works. So it's better to have two cameras. Firstly, just as a backup in case one of them dies. And then also, secondly, it's a great thing to have just to give the illusion of professionalism. You know, all the biggest, bestest productions, podcast productions, have two cameras. The only problem with having two cameras, obviously, is that now, because there's one here and then there's one over here, I kind of feel a lot of pressure to look over there every now and then. And that's a problem because that's going to mean more editing for me. And if there's one thing I hate, well, if there's two things I hate, it's number one, excessive heat. And number two, it's excessive editing. I don't know if there's any editors in the audience, but, you know, editing with two camera angles, that's just double the amount of editing. Anyway, listen, I read the comments on my last podcast episode and they were largely positive. You lot seem to like that episode. But one little criticism I did have, and listen, don't let anybody tell you that I'm not able to take criticism, okay? Don't let anyone tell you that Jen Ives isn't able to take criticism, because I flippin' well am. And one thing I noticed on that last episode was a lot of people going, what's this 30 minutes of rambling at the top? It's not even, what's all this waffle that isn't even anything to do with the title of the podcast? And you know what? I hold my hands up, not literally, but metaphorically. And literally. I'm going to get straight into it today. Except for this small preamble. You're allowed to give me 5 minutes at the start. But we're going to get straight into the topic. Today, I'm talking about Stephen Fry. Do you know who Stephen Fry is? If you don't know who Stephen Fry is, he's kind of a British institution, if that's the right term. I mean, he's not an institution. He's like a, what do they call it? A national treasure. We like Stephen Fry in this country. Stephen Fry is the kind of guy that we as a country have been like, yeah, he's one of the big, like if there was a Mount Rushmore for the UK, he'd most probably be on it, to be honest with you. He's regarded by many as a sort of comedy icon. You know, he came up in the sort of, I think it was the Cambridge comedy scene, which over here, I guess means something. It's like, you know, oh, you're clever and you went to Cambridge and you say very big words and you got a whole load of intelligent stuff going on in that big old brain of yours. And that means you're a funny person because you're smart. If you're not from the UK and you don't know anything about who Stephen Fry is, I'll give you a quick Stephen Fry rundown. Let's do it. Let's go to Wikipedia. So here's some Stephen Fry tidbits. Sir Stephen John Fry. He's a sir. That means the Queen, at some point, has touched his shoulders with a sword. Sir Stephen John Fry born the 24th of August 1957, is an English actor, broadcaster, comedian, director, narrator and writer. He came to prominence as a member of the comic act Fry and Laurie, alongside Hugh Laurie, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. You know, he was in Blackadder. We don't need to read his whole biography. He's probably most well known for being the host of the panel show QI, which is a sort of a light afternoon vibe panel show, which is all about general knowledge, and it's very sort of, you know, twee, and it's not mean like a lot of other British panel shows. But that's not all Stephen Fry has done. He's made documentaries, he's, you know, done lots of work for gay rights. You know, he is a gay man, Stephen Fry, and one of the defining things about Stephen Fry over the years has been his friendship and the work that he has done with JK Rowling. You know JK Rowling? I don't know if you need me to give you a rundown on JK Rowling. I think if you're watching this channel, you probably know enough about old JK, Jamiroquai Rowling. But Stephen Fry famously narrated the audiobooks for the Harry Potter series. Listen, what I'm trying to say to you is that Stephen Fry is a big deal in this country. People go hard for the Fry man. I remember, this is true, I remember years ago, maybe like 10 to 15 years ago, before I even got into comedy or anything like that, I went to a recording. You know, like they do like a live pre-taping of TV shows, and you can go to them because it's free. You don't have to pay any money. You just sort of like apply for the tickets, and that's a free night out. You know, that's a free night out. And you go and you have to line up in a big line, and then you get to watch the taping of the full panel show. And I went to a couple. I went to two of them, two QI recordings. And I remember standing in that line, and ahead of me in the line were a couple of people who were wearing bowler hats, and they both had tattoos on their arms of the QI logo. It's like a Q and an I with a magnifying glass. I remember when I saw that, I thought, wow, okay, so I guess Stephen Fry has some real fans out there, you know? And look, people love him. You know, he's intelligent. He knows lots of facts about cacti and blue whales and the fertilization of an egg. But I'm going to be honest with you right now. I'm going to say something that might be a little bit controversial. So, hot take alert. Personally, I've never really liked Stephen Fry. Now, you're not allowed to say that in this country. You know, if you don't like Stephen Fry, the police will come to your house and they will question you for 7 hours about why you don't like Stephen Fry. And that happened to me. You know, I had to sit down with 12 officers in my living room, and I had to explain in detail why I didn't like Stephen Fry. And this is what I told them. I said, listen, I like Stephen Fry as a concept. I've tried to like Stephen Fry. I read a couple of his books back in the day. I like the idea of Stephen Fry, but, I said, but I can't fully get on board with Stephen Fry because it makes me uncomfortable that he continues, on the one hand, to have this reputation as a LGBT activist sort of dude, while at the same time continuing to not only be friends with, but also publicly defending Joanne JK Jamiroquai Rowling. And he has, you know, he's been asked about JK Rowling in the past, and he's come out as saying, you know, she's a friend, and this is, you know, I hope for her, and, you know, we have minor disagreements, but blah, 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 all this kind of stuff, you know. And it's the same sort of typical rhetoric that you get from a lot of these famous types who despite what they clearly see happening with her, don't want to acknowledge it because she is a powerhouse, okay? And they don't want to get on the wrong side of her because she's very vindictive and she's quick to point the finger and accuse anyone who comes against her as being, a hater of women's rights or hates kids, wants to mutilate kids. Like, she's very... Again, you don't need me to describe to you why JK Rowling is a wrong-un. But this week, okay, this very week, this week of our Lord, whatever week it is right now, as I record this is the 21st of the 6th, 2025, Stephen Fry has come out in a podcast, apparently, and finally said it. He's finally said that he don't think JK Rowling is doing such good stuff anymore. And you know what I say to that? I say, better late than never. Okay, that's the kind of philosophy that I'm trying to adapt to right now. And it's so rare for somebody to actually come out and reevaluate and change their mind and state truthfully how they actually feel about this woman. So I guess I just wanted to come on and give Stephen Fry some credit, really, where it is due. Credit where credit is due. Because look, I've been outspoken about Stephen Fry in the past. I've made it no secret my disillusionment and frustration with the likes of Stephen Fry. But let me read you some of this article that I found about Stephen Fry's recent appearance on this podcast that is called... What's the podcast called? The Show People podcast. Now listen, this is a podcast that I've never heard of, okay? It's not a big time mega podcast like this one, okay? And I tried to find this actual episode of the podcast so I could edit in the clips and we could hear it straight from the Stephen Fry's mouth, so to speak. But I can't find it. And any links I did find to the podcast seemed to be affiliated with some YouTube channel that has like 3 views per video, and I couldn't find any Stephen Fry stuff on there, so I don't know what's going on. I don't know who's heard this podcast, I don't know how they've heard this podcast, but everyone seems to be talking about it. What I can figure out is that I think the podcast was recorded live, so there was like an audience when they spoke about this. And I think what must have happened is maybe someone who saw the podcast live reported to the media, or maybe the media was there and that's how the information got out. Because as of yet, I haven't actually heard the flipping podcast. But we've got it here in text form. So let me read you this story. This is from The Standard, which if you don't know The Standard, it's like I think it's a free paper. It's a free newspaper in London that you get it on the bus, usually. If you're on the bus, you either see a copy of the Metro or a copy of The Standard. So the headline here is, Stephen Fry turns back on Harry Potter author JK Rowling, calling her a lost cause over trans views. Sir Stephen Fry has become the latest Harry Potter alumnus to turn his back on author JK Rowling. So it's really interesting the way that they are framing this, right? He's turned his back on her. Everyone's turning their back on the Queen, JK Rowling. But let's be real about this. Is anyone really turning their back on her? I mean, is that what a friendship is? Is friendship, as defined, I guess, by Joanne, friendship should be that you have to go along with all of my views. You have to agree with me publicly and defend me, regardless of how disgusting I behave. And if you don't, then you're turning your back on me and you're mutilating children. It's like, I can see in a way why so many people have been kind of hesitant, really, to speak out against her. Not that I agree with it, but you can see that, like, if you're actually unlucky enough to be embroiled in a friendship with JK Rowling, I think it's kind of my way or the highway. That's how it kind of seems to be with her. So the Standard has chosen to portray it as Stephen Fry has turned his back on her in a dramatic way. It says here, Harry Potter alumnus to turn his back on author JK Rowling, accusing her of being, quote, radicalized and calling her views on transgender people cruel and mocking. Okay. Radicalized is exactly what she is. I mean, I don't really see how there could be any kind of like debate about that at this point. And in terms of her being cruel and mocking, I think even if you hate trans people, and listen, I've seen my analytics and my stats and comments on this podcast, and, you know, I know there's a few of you watching that seem to hate trans people. Even if you hate trans people, I think you'd be pretty hard-pressed not to admit that she is, at the very least, cruel and mocking. I mean, you could very well agree with that. You might like it that she's cruel and mocking. Again, a lot of you seem to. You know, that's something that I can handle. You know, as long as you're honest and you admit that her cruel and mocking behaviour is the thing that you love. I don't love it, but, you know, we can't go around pretending that she's not cruel and mocking. I mean, that's like her whole vibe right now. It goes on to say, speaking on the Show People podcast, Fry said, she has been radicalised, I fear, perhaps by TERFs, and then in brackets it says trans-exclusionary radical feminist. I mean, listen, I'm really happy that Stephen Fry is speaking out about this, but I don't know why it still has to be, you know, perhaps, maybe, possibly, my theory is by TERFs. It's like, well, no, like, we've been saying that for a really, really long time. Like, it's pretty obvious to anyone who has bothered to look. And this is the thing, it's like, one of the reasons I had a bee in my bonnet for so long about Stephen Fry is because I've never really understood how you can be and claim to be such a, you know, LGBT icon, someone who cares about I mean, he's come out explicitly and said that he does care about the rights of trans people in the past, but it's like, again, it's that cognitive dissonance that we have covered a few times in this podcast now. It's like, okay, why can't you see how a relationship with her is sort of marring that, how it kind of compromises that? I guess to give Stephen Fry a little bit of a benefit of the doubt, I suppose what his issue is that he is her friend, or was her friend, or whatever. And, you know, we've all had that friend, haven't we? That friend who, as we get older, we start to kind of like grow out of, sort of like drift away from them because they stay in their old views, or they become even more aggressive, or they go down a weird kind of pipeline. And sometimes with those kind of relationships, you can intervene and you can stick by them and you can say, listen, you know, I want to get to the bottom of this, like, let's kind of sort this out, like, I'm here for you, blah, blah, blah. But then, you know, all relationships do have that biting point. You know, if there's only... Sometimes there's only so much you can do. If somebody doesn't want to change, if somebody doesn't want to practice empathy or grow as a person, at a certain point you do just have to leave that person behind and then hope that they find the light. And I feel like with Stephen Fry, maybe that's what's happening. Because, like, Stephen Fry doesn't want this in his life. Do you know what I mean? He's got a boyfriend who's like 30 years younger than him that he needs to kind of, I don't know, keep in video games, Mario Kart or whatever. Let me just check that, actually. How old is Stephen Fry? Stephen Fry is 67 years old. How old is Stephen Fry's husband? 36. So, he's older than I said. It's 31 years. So, and listen, they're both legal. There's nothing legally wrong with it. I'm just giving you facts here. That's all I'm trying to do, is give you some facts. That's all. If Stephen's happy, I'm happy. So just to quote Stephen Fry again, she has been radicalised, I fear, perhaps by TERFs, but also by the vitriol that is thrown at her. Okay, see, now this sentence, again, rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. Because, like, I'm not going to sit here and say that there aren't people out there who send JK Rowling horrible messages, who probably say some really, like, dodgy things to her. But let's just keep in mind, try and remember that JK Rowling is a public figure who actively uses her money and her time to fight against trans rights. People are going to get upset about that. And she knows that, and actually that's part of her strategy. A lot of these gender critical campaigners and stuff, they love the fact that people lash out at them because it gives them ammunition to be like, look, these people are crazy. I have to say, you know, I do appreciate Stephen Fry coming out and saying this, but I don't appreciate the victim blaming segment of it. He's still a little bit wishy-washy on it. And, you know, that's fine. I get it. But that might dissipate a little bit when JK Rowling starts her inevitable calculated hate campaign towards him. Because she does tend to do that. You know, if you, quote-unquote, turn your back on JK Cornelius Rowling, you will feel the wrath of a children's author scorned. It is unhelpful and only hardens her. I'm afraid she seems to be a lost cause for us. So this is interesting. So Stephen Fry claims that he thinks JK Rowling is a lost cause. Not just for him, but for us. So in that sentence, is he aligning himself with the wider LGBT community? If so, that's, you know, a good thing. I think it's nice to hear him kind of include us, the T, you know, the evil T. You know, there are quite a lot of gay and lesbian people around of Stephen Fry's sort of age bracket who, particularly in the public eye, just don't really have any interest in speaking out at all. You know, they want to toe the line as much as possible and not sort of rock the boat. And I think a lot of that is directly contributing towards this weird sort of ideology at the moment, which is seeking to separate the T and the Q from the LGB, you know, and it's dangerous. So I like that he said us. I like that he includes himself in the community. And listen, like, I don't want to get it twisted. I am really happy with his statement, despite any bits that I might slightly disagree with in it. I think it's largely positive that he's stepping out and doing this. I guess I hope that more people like him will do similar. You know, I'm talking about your Darren Browns or, you know, your Graham Nortons. You know, I want to see it addressed, honestly. I want to see people not being so cowardly all the time. And this statement, you know, it doesn't make me now suddenly some huge Stephen Fry mega fan. Like, I don't think I ever will be a Stephen Fry mega fan. I'm not a huge fan of Stephen Fry generally from a comic point of view, I guess. I'm not really a huge fan of any of that sort of Cambridge, Oxford, sort of footlightsy kind of scene. And, you know, I wrote a piece about Stephen Fry on my blog a while ago and about how disappointed I was about it all and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I was thinking, oh, should I, like, delete that now? But then I thought, no, I'm not going to delete it because that was true then. You know, when I wrote that stuff, that's how I felt at that time. And you know, as I said, it's better late than never, but make no mistake, it is late. Like, it's pretty late in the day to be figuring this out, you know? Because in a lot of ways, the damage has been done. Stephen Fry is somebody who has a lot of influence in the media, and he could have definitely done a lot more, a lot sooner to kind of help us out and fight for us. And he didn't, and that sucks. But this statement by him is, in my opinion, promising and gives me a little bit of hope that some people might be starting to see through the sort of propaganda of the gender critical movement. And you know, Stephen Fry brings up the term TERF, the trans exclusionary radical feminist, and it's like, yeah, it's, I understand why people use that term. It's an easy term, TERF, and people know what you mean when you say it, but the reason why I don't love it as a term, obviously, is because of the feminist part. Because I don't think a lot of these people who are the spokespeople for TERFs actually really have that many feminist qualities. When you listen to them and you watch their stuff and you try to analyze what it is they're talking about, usually it just boils down to they think trans people are weird and shouldn't be anywhere near kids. They're not usually talking that much about the struggles of women past hypothetical scenarios in which trans people get too close and, invade the toilets or whatever. It's always hypothetical things that could happen, signs of social decline. I think gender critical is most probably the best term for them, because, well, that's kind of what they are. They're critical of gender. It's a very, reductive and silly moniker for yourself. I'm very critical of gender. Do you remember when they were trying to, make gender skeptic a thing? I'm a gender skeptic. It's interesting how they've kind of adopted some of the language of the new atheist movement, and they're kind of yeah, well, I don't believe in that God, or this God, or wacky gender identity. But look what happened to the new atheist movement, It all seemed fun and games at the time, when everyone was hitch-slapping everybody and Richard Dawkins was, laying down the law. And then, 10 years later, you look back at some of that stuff and you're like, oh, it actually seemed a little bit racist, some of it, and quite sexist, a lot of it. And, yeah, maybe the new atheist movement was a bit cringe at the end of the day. And, yeah, I kind of hope that the gender critical movement will be looked back on in a similar way. The article goes on to say, Fry, who is gay and a long-time advocate for LGBTQ plus rights, said Rowling's stance has left him angry and saddened, particularly her refusal to distance herself from the more extreme rhetoric shared by some of her supporters. That's a good point. It's a good point from old Stephen. She started to make these peculiar statements and had very strong, difficult views, he said. Difficult views. Your views are very difficult. Doesn't that just sound like they're sort of hard to understand? You got some very difficult views right there. People... It's interesting to me that even in a kind of piece like this that is largely positive, there's still this attempt to kind of sugarcoat the language of it. People really do want to step on eggshells when it comes to JK Rowling, and I've said this before, it's because her work is so influential. I don't like Harry Potter, but lots of people do. They really do. It means a lot to them. And it's, a lot of people make a lot of money through the work of Harry Potter. Like I said, Stephen Fry does fall under that bracket. Stephen Fry has some of his National Treasure status from his involvement in the Harry Potter world. So I feel like it's almost like his instinct. It's almost like he can't help himself but sugarcoat the language. And it's well, if you are talking about, how horrible her views are, or how gross the things she said are, please give us some examples, because I know they're there. People always say this whenever you criticize JK Rowling, you always get a comment that goes, excuse me, could you please tell me exactly what she said that you have a problem with? I don't see how she is transphobic. And then trans people are well, there's kind of too many to even count. You only have to just glance at her X profile and you'll see her sharing disgusting memes of, horrible caricatures of trans people and gross images, comparing people to, rapists, and using horrible, weird TERF language. if there's one thing that you're not going to convince me of, it's that JK Rowling isn't transphobic, okay? She decided at a certain point that she was going to go all in. And trans people are just kind of a bit exhausted by it. Like, we know. We don't need to be convinced any further. Like, we've got the receipts, trust me. But it would be nice to have someone in the mainstream actually call attention to these things and say, look, this is what I have a problem with, actually. And if you're still going around thinking that she's this perfect crusader for women's rights, you need to look a little bit more closely and actually maybe listen to some people in the queer community. Because obviously, like, there's this kind of disconnect that's happening here. I can imagine that Stephen Fry has been mulling over this for probably some time. You know, how can I broach this subject? But let's be honest here, it must be very difficult to hold those two conflicting identities at once. You know, on the one hand, you've got, I'm an ardent LGBTQ activist. And on the other hand, I'm a close personal friend with JK Rowling. Because JK Rowling is definitely not that. You know, she's not an LGBTQ activist. And she makes that pretty clear. Fry goes on to say, I disagree profoundly with her on this subject. She says things that are inflammatory, contemptuous, and mocking. They add to a terribly distressing time for trans people. This bit I liked. It's, again, he got there in the end. It's like, yes, can you please address how this affects trans people? Because we're always the ones left out of the conversation. Even this article has framed it in a way in which JK Rowling is somehow the victim. Because Stephen Fry actually came out and said something that was true about her for once. You know? But no, the standard is like, oh no, they turned their back on her. It's like, don't worry about Joanne. She's got plenty of friends. She's got new friends. She's graduated. She's gone to big school now. And she's got a new group of friends. And listen, they're a bad influence on her. They are. They're a bit of a bad influence on her, but sometimes you've got to let people make their own mistakes, don't you? Fry said he had once enjoyed Rowling's company and had chosen not to speak out publicly at the height of the controversy, despite criticism from within the LGBTQ plus community. In 2022, he told the Beeb Watch podcast, again, I have to say that's a podcast I've never heard of. Who are these podcasts that I've never heard of? How are they getting Stephen Fry? Can't I get Stephen Fry? Not anymore, Jen. Not the way you talked about him. What did I say? You said that thing about his husband being 30 years younger than him. It's true. He is. I'm sorry. Stephen Fry, if you want to come on a podcast, come on my podcast, not these nobody podcasts. He's not going to come on the podcast, Jen. He might. You don't know. In 2022, he told the Beeb Watch podcast that he wouldn't abandon either Rowling or his trans friends. Yeah, I remember that. That was him just basically sitting on the fence and being like, listen. He was like, I can do more good from the inside. I can bring it down from the inside. And people were just like, no, I don't think that's going to work. And he's finally realised that that's not going to work. But 3 years on, he has now taken a firmer stance, describing the current anti-trans climate as a genuine emergency. Yes, finally. Preach it, Stephen. It is an emergency. Our rights are eroding. It sucks. It's bad stuff. You should be shouting this from the rooftops. He might come on this podcast. If I ask him nicely, he might. He's not going to. If he ever sees that article I wrote about him, he definitely won't come on. That's for sure. He might. You have to hope. He changed his mind about this, didn't he? Quote, when it comes to the transphobia issue, it is right to remind people that trans people are here and that they are hurting. They are being abominably treated. There's a great deal of bullying, violence, suicide, and genuine agony in the trans community. He also warned against reducing the debate to social media outrage. To scream transphobe at anybody who doesn't buy into every single aspect of a person's trans views is self-harming. It doesn't get the thing done. You have to let people love you. Okay, this bit, again, rubs me the wrong way. Because I guess people like Stephen Fry only really see all of this from the point of view of the online sphere. And so for that reason, they see it as, oh, you're all as bad as each other. You're not getting anything done in your cause because you're stooping to their level. And it's like, well, I think it's important to understand and keep in mind that trans people have tried to play nice hundreds of times. We're always trying to play nice. We're like so nice. I'm so nice. He says here, you have to let people love you. I want them to love me. I want you to love me, Stephen Fry. I never said I didn't want people to love me, but it's a bit like a toxic relationship with an abusive parent in a way, isn't it? It's like, I want you to love me. And then they punch you and you go, yeah, okay, well, I love you, please. And they punch you again and you go, I'm not going to take it anymore. And then the moment that we say we're not going to take it anymore, then we lose. It's kind of this horrible catch-22. It's like, what are we supposed to do? You can't tell us not to fight back. You can't tell us not to defend ourselves, okay? As has already been... I have to say, I do think it's a little bit rich for Stephen Fry to kind of like try to morally grandstand over trans people on this point, because it's like, where have you been? What have you been doing the last 3 years in this time? Why does it take you this amount of time to realize one of the most simple basic things? If it takes you this long to realize that JK Rowling has bad intentions, I don't know if again, I like the statement. I'm not critiquing that. I'm happy that you're on our side. But at the same time, I'm not going to be looking to you, Stephen Fry, for any hot takes. I'm not going to be looking to you for any kind of direction on the movement. We're happy to have you aboard, but we're not going to make you captain all of a sudden. Do you know what I mean? Fry joins Harry Potter stars Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson and Rupert Grint in publicly distancing themselves from Rowling's views on gender identity and trans rights. All three have expressed support for the trans community in the past. And listen, all of these people, I don't think any of them really turned their back on JK Rowling. If anything, JK Rowling turns her back on you, because what happens is you speak out against something bad that she's doing and saying. You speak out against her prejudice. And then because you're not able to conform to her whims, she is the one who blasts you publicly. But news outlets like this and the media in general, they really do handle JK Rowling with kid gloves. They really do bubble wrap her and sort of try to protect her. And it's like, have you seen her? She doesn't need protecting. She is all in. She's out there. By contrast, actor Tom Felton, who played Draco Malfoy, has said Rowling's views don't change his gratitude towards her or the franchise. And see, that's the thing. It's J.K. Rowling expects a level of gratitude. I especially remember that with Emma Watson, right? And Daniel Radcliffe. It's J.K. Rowling seemed personally slighted that they would disagree with her on this issue. And because of that, she turned it into this narrative of you'd be nowhere without me. She's like a drunk, abusive parent. That's literally how she reads. And the article here ends with, Fry's comments come just weeks after a landmark ruling by the UK Supreme Court clarified that, under the Equality Act, the terms woman and sex refer to biological sex. The decision was described by judges as a legal clarification, not a win for either side, but still sparked widespread reaction. JK Rowling celebrated the ruling with photos of champagne and cigars aboard a luxury yacht. Fry, reflecting on the tone of the debate, said, I always liked her company. I found her charming, funny and interesting. And then this thing happened and it completely altered the way she talks and engages with the world now. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there because it would be cruel to talk about JK Rowling or Stephen Fry for any longer than an hour. And also it's really, really hot. I've got a fan on. I don't know if it's going to mess with the sound, but I've also got this light on as well, and I can't do long. It's too hot. I'm impressed that I even managed to do it today, I'll be honest with you. It's so warm. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Please remember to subscribe if you're not already subscribed. You can become a Patreon at patreon.com/lobotomyworld. It really helps. Or you could become a member on YouTube to get access to members-only videos, including a new one this week that I'll put a preview of right now. You can see that it's like a very clear influence on Nathan Fielder, but Nathan Fielder has done something that is arguably even more impressive in that he's managed to take that idea and bring it into sort of like the real world for like, in the second series of The Rehearsal especially, for a tangible, meaningful. Thank you so much for continuing to watch and enjoy. I've nearly reached 3,000 subscribers, which is kind of crazy. I should do something different and fun for the 3,000 subscribers I should do like a video, 3,000 subscribers video, right? The big 3,000 special. What should I do? Leave a comment recommending what you would like to see me do for 3,000 subbies. I've got some ideas, but I'm also open to input. Alright, I hope you have a nice rest of your week, and I hope the sun gives it a rest for a bit soon, because I wasn't made for this climate. Hey, I was born in Britain for a reason, you know? I didn't ask to be born in the flipping Sahara Desert, did I? Goodbye. Bye, everybody. Bye. See you later. Bye. Bye. Bye, camera one. Bye, camera one. Bye, camera two. Camera one, I love you. Bye, camera two. Bye. 2 cameras is better than 1, isn't it?